Tiananmen Square, a turning point in modern China. Uncover the untold stories of courage and resilience that shaped a nation. Journey back to 1989 and witness the events that unfolded in Tiananmen Square. The late 1980s in China were a period of immense change and growing pains. Economic reforms, while bringing prosperity to some, also created inequalities and fueled discontent. Many felt that the benefits of economic growth were not being shared equally. Corruption among government officials became rampant, eroding public trust. Inflation soared, impacting the living standards of ordinary citizens. This economic instability created a fertile ground for social unrest. Students, intellectuals, and workers began to voice their concerns. They yearned for greater political freedom and an end to corruption. Inspired by the spirit of reform, they sought dialogue with the government. Their initial demands were modest, focusing on transparency and accountability. The death of Hu Yaobang, a reform-minded official, served as a catalyst. His passing ignited a spark of collective grief and frustration. Hu Yaobang was seen as a symbol of hope for political liberalization. His removal from power years earlier had already angered many. Students gathered in Tiananmen Square to mourn his death. They also used the occasion to express their broader grievances. The gatherings grew in size and intensity. What began as mourning quickly transformed into a powerful movement for change. Demands for democracy, freedom of speech, and an end to corruption echoed across the square. The students' voices resonated with many across the nation. Tiananmen Square became the epicenter of a nationwide movement. Students from various universities joined the protests, swelling the ranks. The atmosphere in the square was electric. A sense of hope and possibility permeated the air. The students organized themselves effectively. They established a command structure and maintained order within the protest area. They erected tents and banners, transforming the square into a temporary city. The goddess of democracy statue became a powerful symbol of their aspirations. Workers, intellectuals, and even some government officials joined the students. The protests gained momentum, posing a significant challenge to the government. Initially, the government attempted to engage in dialogue with the students. However, these efforts proved largely unsuccessful. Hardliners within the Communist Party advocated for a forceful suppression of the protests. They viewed the movement as a threat to their authority. Moderate voices within the government urged restraint and negotiation. They hoped to find a peaceful resolution to the crisis. The government's response was fractured and inconsistent. This indecision further fueled the protests and emboldened the students. Martial law was declared in Beijing. Troops were deployed to the outskirts of the city, signaling a potential crackdown. On the night of June 3rd and 4th, the government launched a military crackdown. Troops advanced on Tiananmen Square, met with resistance from protesters. The events of that night remain shrouded in controversy. Accounts vary regarding the level of violence and the number of casualties. Eyewitnesses reported seeing soldiers firing upon unarmed civilians. The government maintained that force was only used against violent protesters. The crackdown resulted in numerous deaths and injuries. The exact number of casualties remains a subject of debate. The world watched in horror as the events unfolded. The crackdown marked a turning point in China's modern history. In the aftermath of the crackdown, the government suppressed dissent. Many protesters were arrested, imprisoned, or exiled. The events of Tiananmen Square became a taboo subject in China. Public discussion of the protests was strictly censored. The government focused on maintaining stability and economic growth. Political reforms were largely sidelined. The Tiananmen Square protests had a profound impact on China and the world. They exposed the tensions between economic progress and political freedom. The legacy of Tiananmen continues to shape China's political landscape. It serves as a reminder of the ongoing struggle for human rights and democracy. The international community reacted with condemnation and outrage. Many countries imposed sanctions on China in response to the crackdown. Governments and human rights organizations called for accountability and transparency. They demanded an investigation into the events of Tiananmen Square. The United States and other Western nations suspended military cooperation with China. They also imposed restrictions on trade and investment. The global response highlighted the importance of human rights in international relations. It also underscored the challenges of engaging with authoritarian regimes. The sanctions had a limited impact on China's economic growth. However, they did isolate the country diplomatically for a period of time. The memory of Tiananmen Square remains a powerful symbol of resistance. It inspires activists and human rights advocates around the world. Each year, vigils and commemorations are held to honor the victims. These events serve as a reminder of the importance of truth and justice. The Tiananmen Square protests represent a pivotal moment in history. They highlight the universal desire for freedom and democracy. It is essential to remember the events of Tiananmen Square. We must learn from the past and work towards a future where human rights are respected. The pursuit of truth and justice is a continuous process. We must never forget the sacrifices made by those who stood up for their beliefs. China's economic reforms continued in the years following Tiananmen. The country experienced rapid economic growth, becoming a global powerhouse. However, this growth came at a cost. Inequality widened, and environmental degradation became a serious concern. The government maintained tight control over the economy. State-owned enterprises continued to play a dominant role. The benefits of economic growth were not shared equally. Rural areas lagged behind urban centers, creating a divide. The Tiananmen Square protests highlighted the need for a more equitable and sustainable model of development. The challenge remains to balance economic progress with social justice. The Chinese government tightened its grip on power after Tiananmen. Freedom of speech and assembly were severely restricted. The internet was heavily censored, social media platforms were monitored, and dissenting voices were silenced. The Communist Party maintained its monopoly on power. There was little room for political opposition or independent activism. The government emphasized stability and national unity. Any challenge to its authority was met with swift and decisive action. The political landscape in China remains tightly controlled. The legacy of Tiananmen continues to shape the relationship between the government and its citizens. The media played a crucial role in shaping narratives about Tiananmen. Both domestic and international media coverage influenced public opinion. The Chinese government controlled the domestic media. It presented a narrative that justified the crackdown and demonized the protesters. International media outlets provided a different perspective. They highlighted the students' demands for democracy and condemned the government's use of force. The flow of information was heavily restricted. The government attempted to control the narrative and prevent the spread of dissenting views. The role of media in shaping public opinion is undeniable. The Tiananmen Square protests serve as a reminder of the importance of a free and independent press. The Tiananmen Square protests had a profound impact on a generation of Chinese citizens. Many were disillusioned with the government and the political system. Some chose to leave the country, seeking opportunities and freedoms elsewhere. Others remained in China, working quietly for change. The events of Tiananmen shaped their worldview and their understanding of power. They learned the importance of standing up for their beliefs, even in the face of adversity. The legacy of Tiananmen lives on in the hearts and minds of those who witnessed it. It continues to inspire them to strive for a better future. The long-term effects of Tiananmen are still being felt today. The protests represent a turning point in China's modern history, a moment of both tragedy and hope. The Tiananmen Square protests hold important lessons for today's world. They remind us of the importance of democracy, human rights, and freedom of expression. They also highlight the dangers of authoritarianism and the need for accountability. The events of Tiananmen serve as a cautionary tale. We must learn from the past and work towards a future where such tragedies are never repeated. The pursuit of justice and equality is a continuous struggle. The Tiananmen Square protests are a reminder that change is possible. Even in the face of overwhelming odds, people can stand up for their beliefs and make a difference. The lessons of Tiananmen are relevant to all of us. They remind us of the importance of defending our freedoms and standing up for what is right. The Tiananmen Square protests of 1989 remain a pivotal moment in modern history. They represent a complex interplay of economic reform, political aspiration, and ultimately, tragic suppression. By understanding the context, the motivations, and the consequences of these events, we gain valuable insights into the ongoing struggle for human rights and democratic ideals. Let us remember the courage of those who stood in Tiananmen Square, and let their story inspire us to advocate for a more just and equitable world. Take action. Delve deeper into the history of Tiananmen Square by exploring primary source documents, watching documentaries, and engaging in respectful discussions. Share this video with others to promote awareness and understanding. Support organizations that advocate for human rights and freedom of expression. Together, we can ensure that the lessons of Tiananmen are never forgotten.